Hello, hello, hello. This is Joe of the West,
And I am Zeal of Sparta.
and we are here for another episode of the Pseudo-Random Podcast, episode 17 for this date, which is, I believe, the 16th. And how are you doing this week, Zeal?
Doing very good. Actually relaxing and not driving on the road for once.
Yeah, you're on the road a lot, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's been over 2 months since I have not driven one day out of the week, period.
Oh,
So I've been driving every day for 2 months.
geez, I hate taking trips, so I can't even imagine. So,
Yeah.
to get started, let's how about you tell us where we can find you and what you're dealing with.
Well, to find me, you can find me twitter.com at handle Zeal of Sparta, or my typical YouTube domicile, youtube.com/Zeal of Sparta. Or you could now find me on Twitch. I have reactivated my account and I will be streaming there soon. It is Zeal _of _Sparta if you enter in the URL after the slash.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. So you couldn't get the all together like before.
Well, no, I don't like the run together bit, so
Uh,
I did that.
okay. Well,
I
if you want to,
blame, yeah, OCD or whatever.
okay. Well, if you want to see what I'm doing, slash Joe of the West on YouTube and slash Joe of the West on Twitter. That's pretty much the same thing on everything. Um, But anyway, so let's jump to the first story of the week, which is mine. It's about Samsung and their UFS memory cards, which is what they're calling the successor to micro SD. Now, the neat thing about this is it's a lot faster than the micro SD. Now, I don't know if you've played around with the micro SDs a lot, but writing to
Yes.
them is very, very slow.
Yes, they cannot keep up with me, and I am always running out of memory on my phone.
Right.
I have a Lumia 950 XL as my daily driver, and it can record 4K video. And I'm usually using the onboard memory because the SD card would be too slow, even at the highest standard.
Right.
And I have the same issue on my Nikon camera. It cannot record quite fast enough.
Well, the newest one from Samsung, the newest standard from Samsung, I should say, has a write speed of up to 170 megabits a second. So you
Which is
don't
like
have to.
twice as fast
Oh
as
yes,
the cards I'm using on my camera.
yes. It's just give a comparison to those who may not know. My wife has an Nikon camera, and it's not the newest of the newest, but it's actually not that old, and it can only do 10, 10 seconds, I want to say, of HD video, which is, it's not that fast, but it's not that slow either. So it, it can't do a lot of stuff. So if you've got a lot, if you want to do a a 30-minute movie with her camera, you basically can't because because it requires such a a high speed.
Yeah,
But
it
with
it's not capable of delivering the needed bandwidth for a lot of modern cameras, including like say these 360-degree cameras that are rolling a lot, or 1080p 60 frame per second cameras like my phone, and also 4K that my phone can do as well, or just cramming a lot of data. And the phone will
exactly,
have to slow down and process it so it can save, so it
that's
will fill
exactly
up the
true.
buffers in the memory. Yeah.
So what my wife's camera does, and what most modern cameras do, is they will basically cache whatever they can, and then whatever, and they'll write to the memory as fast as they can, but you effectively end up with some kind of cap. The UFS, which is what Samsung has released, it supposedly will deal with that issue. So you still have the issue of how fast you want to record stuff, but this takes a lot of that away. If that makes sense.
Right. It's freeing up the bottleneck. It's like adding a second interstate to the
Exactly.
addition. Yeah.
It's adding extra lanes to the highway. I mean, it's not literally actually adding extra lanes to the storage, but it's the
Now,
way it handles it is a lot better.
here's a good analogy. Think of it like raising the interstate speed limit from 60 miles an hour to 75 miles an hour without an increase in crash rates. Just theoretically speaking.
Right. And that would work, except for people actually, you know, crash all the time. But
Yeah,
I get what you're
assuming there's
saying.
no increase in errors. It's equivalent to that, in my opinion, from
Right,
my
and
point of view.
it's the difference between um, the old school parallel drives and the newer serial drives. So yes, serial sounds like it should take longer or you should be slower, but the way it handles it's a lot better.
It's a much more efficient method, by the sounds of it.
Exactly. So I'm excited to see, what the UFS cards or their other manufacturers' equivalents do for how we handle these things.
Right,
How
it's a
they
new
how they look
standard
at it.
and it has great potential, and I look forward to seeing the improvements.
Right.
Both editing, recording, and transferring wise, it will make a big difference down the road.
Right. And if you're not familiar with how these work, if you ever take like a cheap SD or a cheap thumb drive,
Right,
just think about how long it takes you to copy to the drive versus how long it takes to copy from the drive. That
right.
time that takes to copy to the drive takes forever. It takes many, many, many minutes. But the
Indeed.
time it takes to copy from the drive doesn't take long at all. So if you can
No,
reduce that time, that's what the UFS cards are helping to solve is the time it
right.
takes to put data on this flash memory.
Yeah, that's their big advantage I see, really, even though the other spec is more dramatic, and instead of going twice the write speed, you're getting 5 times the read speed of some of
Right.
your best micro SD cards. And it's what, 540 megs per second,
Yeah,
which is
it's
that's
five
also
fifty or something
yeah.
around there.
But that to me is better if I'm trying to transfer it from, say, the card to my computer, which I do on a routine basis. But the
Right.
write speed is definitely the most important to me because that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, and that's where if you and this is kind of a buyer beware. Nah, I can't speak today. A buyer
Caveat
beware.
emptor, buyer beware.
Exactly. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to use, you know, not English, the buyer beware comes into play. If you the rights, a lot of this stuff is the average speed. So a lot of memory, a lot of flash memory, especially, is the average speed. So you can read from it quickly, but when you write to it, it's very very slow, and that's where Samsung is trying to shorten that gap per se.
Right, and they're trying to get the advantage. Um, yeah, they are trying to be cutting edge, which is great. They're
Right.
a good company. They make good phones. They make good products in general. I have their TVs. Uh, I have a monitor at home from them. I used to have one of their phones, which made good pictures for
Right.
the time. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Samsung is one of those companies that I I basically fully support. I mean, there's very few companies that I support everything they do, but Samsung is one of those. Like I literally have a Samsung refrigerator.
You
It
do, and
sounds
it's a nice refrigerator.
which sounds ridiculous, you know. It's like, ooh, you have a Samsung refrigerator. Well, yes, I have a Samsung refrigerator, and I have a Samsung Note 5. Uh, but I do, and before then I had a Galaxy 3, an S3. You know, it's one of those
Yeah,
few
yeah, that's
companies
three. I
that,
remember that phone.
yeah,
They're a good company. Not to doll them up too much. They are a good full line producer of goods.
exactly. And you know, you know, I'm sure they do things that are terrible, you know, just like every company. But you know what they do, what they do. I'm trying not to say it that way.
They have a good brand image. They have a good
Exactly,
standard that is world renowned. I'll say.
exactly.
Uh, yeah, which is fine in my book. I'd like to have a nice trusted manufacturer of goods.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, brand image can mean a lot. And speaking of, Tesla is having a bit of an issue with that right now, as of the past few weeks. I believe it was back in May. They had an issue where one of their drivers, an owner of a Tesla Model S, who was actively using the Autopilot feature, which
Right.
some have called for having the name changed. Well, the driver died while Autopilot was engaged. And
Uh-huh.
that's a big deal because this is the first major accident of any kind involving autonomous technology in automobiles. And it's quite tragic that he died. Uh,
Right.
and Tesla's having to review that themselves. They've opened up an internal investigation. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened up an investigation as well, mostly with their ODI department, the Office of Defects Investigation, which the government should fund better, to be honest. And they're all trying to take a step back and look and see what really happened. Now, early speculation is that uh, the the car is programmed, which is also still in beta, to look at a number of factors on the roadway to evaluate and see what's a threat and what's safe and what is just, hey, it's a cloud, ignore it, or a sign, ignore it. And that's exactly what caused an issue here. There was a semi or tractor or lorry, however you would prefer to call it, with a trailer, a full trailer. And it was a broad white side, reflecting a lot of the light and heat and whatnot, uh, making a left hand turn. And this Tesla Model S happened to broadside it, and the car itself thought it was either a cloud or a sign because it's programmed to see big things like that are above the ground as such. And usually that is the case. Normally that is the case. But considering how bright the siding was, and I thought that Tesla, maybe it does, has radar. Uh, I thought the radar may have picked up the fact that there's a trailer there, but for some reason it assumed it was a cloud, and it proceeded to go under it, which is a terrible way to go. You effectively lose most, if not all, of your crash structure.
Right. So I guess I was confused a little bit about this story. The When you say it thought it was a cloud, I mean, how does it, or do you know how it determines what an object actually is?
Well, yeah, it's the sensors on the car evaluate the roadway ahead, and it will often see clouds and signs. Well, to prevent the car slamming on the brakes unnecessarily, it has been taught scenarios And this is one of those cases of, hey, we can think of 999,000 scenarios, and then there's one additional scenario we did not think of to program in, and this was the case. It was think most of the time it would think there's a sign or a cloud ahead, and program it to not react to it, causing a different kind of accident or a chain reaction accident. Um, so it would not illogically react to clouds and signs flying overhead, which are really common.
Okay.
But for whatever specific reason, the vehicle interpreted it as something overhead and not as a semi making a left-hand turn on a highway.
Okay,
Oh, and
so
this was in Florida, so it was really bright and it was really hot.
right.
And the amount of light it was giving off was probably perceived as the cloud, which is why it led to that speculation.
Okay, so the Tesla basically thought that it was looking at something up in the sky, but it was actually a truck.
Right, right.
Okay.
It's still a limited. Uh, it's not even a being. It's not a complete holistic evaluating being. It's just
Right.
it's still a machine, really, and it's only as good as how it is programmed and how little bits and pieces of human knowledge is inputted into it.
Well, I mean that
But a
applies
human
to
can analyze holistically the situation and fully react, making a judgment. But apparently, this driver, they're still drivers, and they still apparently take legal responsibility, and they're supposed to be attentive while autopilot is engaged.
right, and that only makes sense while we get used to how um, you know to how the autopilot stuff works. Um,
Right.
so I think from what I read, it's it's something that couldn't really have been predicted, but it also looks like it thought it was looking at something, up in the air, up in the sky that you would ignore, but it wasn't. It was something on the ground that it should have been paying attention to.
Right. It was potentially a fluke.
Right. So,
And it's something we need to learn from. And it's controversial. It's caused some controversy.
although I will
Uh,
say this, you also link the U.S. Department of Transportation, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, their review of it, their version of it, and they're only saying there was only one crash, one fatality of
right.
of an automated vehicle,
Right.
which to
This is the
me,
first of its kind.
right, which I don't know if I actually said this on a podcast, but I know I've said it before that I was concerned that as soon as somebody died, as soon as there was some kind of fatality or whatever, that the whole automated, you know what I'm saying, the not automated per se, but the system of automated drivers would be scrapped because people would be just like, well, you see, people have died, and that's
The
always been a concern that
the
I have.
anti-automation crowd.
Right. And the thing
The
is, with any, quote unquote, any system, there's going to be some kind of issue with it.
right.
So if you have a million miles of nothing happening, but then you have one person who dies, my concern has always been that they're going to lock on to the one person who died, and then see, it's dangerous, and the whole system would be scrapped.
Right. And some people are going to feel that way and be overbearing about it.
Right.
There's always that crowd, that counter argument to something new or something existing, something that has existed for thousands of years. They'll bark about it. Deniers, so to speak. But with any new technology or new thing in general, there is going to be a learning curve because it's effectively being created from nothing. So I'm a firm believer of people over the ages are not necessarily stupid or backwards in one way or another. They're basically going off of what they have already, and they have to continuously build off of that knowledge base over time.
Right.
So people of the year 3000, some of them may think we're morons for using technology as the way we are doing right now and not having holodecks and
Well,
teleportation
I'm not so
devices.
worried about the people, 3,000 years from now. I'm more so worried about the people who are, you know, right now.
Going to block it and shut it down altogether. That does not seem to be the case here. There are some that are voicing against it, and there is a Senate hearing coming up, I believe, where they're going to grill Tesla on it. But I don't think it's going to be shut down right away. It's making progress. Companies are heavily investing in it, and that's really a moving force when large-scale development and research projects are put into it. It will have momentum. It has gained momentum. A lot of the semi-autonomous assist devices have been doing good work, and according to the statistics, I cannot quite recall the specific number, but the fatality and injury rate of cars with autonomous systems, more specifically the Teslas, are much lower. There's a much lower odd of having an accident of any kind with those systems, especially a fatal one. And things will happen. It's just like people got upset because there was a Tesla on fire a couple of years ago. Well, the thing is, gasoline cars burn up all the time.
Yeah.
In comparison, and we still have.
I'm not worried about Tesla and hitting. I'm not worried about Tesla and they're not. And they're, you know what I'm saying? What I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're. I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is people taking something like this that everybody has an issue with, in every level, and say, well, you see, we had a car that people died in. Well, yeah, if you take, just generically every car, every scenario, you have somebody who dies, and it's unfortunate. I don't think you.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Things happen. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's inadvertent, sometimes it's pure tragedy.
Right.
Fortunately, we can avoid a lot of issues in cars, driving in general, including, just put down the Pokemon Go when you're driving, like one individual did recently when I think it was he, ended up colliding with a tree because he was going down the road playing Pokemon Go.
It's very hilarious that you mentioned Pokemon Go because that's my next story. So,
Yes.
From what I understand, because you're on Windows Phone, you can't play Pokemon Go.
At least not yet, as far as I know. I haven't really checked.
Well, I think that's hilarious. So, to go with the next story, Pokemon Go is... Well, if anybody's played Pokemon, you know how the basic story goes. You go, you're quote-unquote a 10-year-old kid who goes and tries to capture Pokemon, and the old school thing was you got to catch them all. The more modern thing, you can't say you got to catch them all because you literally can't.
No,
there's
they have
700.
like a million.
Yeah, there's 700 something Pokemon, and you can't bring them from earlier versions. And the earlier, like the first 100, 200 Pokemon, they don't exist in the current version. So you literally cannot catch them all.
Like no Charmander, Bulbasaur, and that sort of
Yep.
thing.
The
I have to leave
Generation
out
1
Squirtle.
Pokemon don't exist in the current version. I mean, okay. Well, it depends on what you mean by the current version.
Pidgeys.
The version on Nintendo.
Right, if you can hear that, folks, that was Pokemon Ruby. On my Game Boy Advance SP, I still have.
Yeah, I was about to ask you what that noise was.
I thought it was appropriate. I just had it sitting over here.
It's quite
There's a guy at
appropriate.
work that keeps trolling me. He was like, dude, why don't you have Pokemon Go? Dude, why don't you have it? You're jealous, aren't you? It's like, I'm going to buy you an iPhone. He just said the iPhone thing yesterday. I doubt he's going to follow up with it, but still, it's kind of hilarious. Some people are getting quite
I
up
would
about it.
take it.
And then I showed him this Game Boy this week.
But there was an issue with the iPhone where basically if you had an iPhone and you had Pokemon Go, the way they did their permissions was they got permission for full account access.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's oops.
Yeah, I would definitely go with oops. I don't think they were trying anything nefarious, but
No, the iPhone by design actually has a number of issues with things like that because it was originally designed to be a first party platform with only first party apps. So the apps that Apple designed for the iPhone itself were supposed to be within its own ecosystem, not with all of these outside apps. But
right.
they eventually bowed under pressure. This was still back in the early days of like 2007, 2008 of the original iPhone. And they eventually opened it up to developers, and developers hopped on. And every once in a while, this problem will crop up.
Right. Well, what basically happened with the iPhone version is that the iPhone version had full Google account access, which is a lot. I mean, it basically boils down to, Pokemon Go could send emails as you. It could log into other services as you. What
Yeah,
they basically said was, we didn't mean this. What we meant was, what most people mean. It's like, we're going to use your Google account to authenticate that you are you. But they were
right.
using an old API. And the old API basically gave them full access. So there was an issue with that. That I don't think is that big of a deal because basically they were saying, excuse me, they were saying, whoops, we accidentally claimed full access when all we wanted was to verify you were you.
Right.
So
They simply wanted verification. They just had more than they bargained for,
exactly.
so to speak.
So the iPhone users gave Pokemon Go full access, but Pokemon Go only claimed, the bare minimum. They only used the bare minimum. And
Right.
Google has come back and said, yeah, we verified that they only used the bare minimum.
Right.
So there was that issue. But the one
Yeah.
I think is more interesting, besides the fact that, people don't know how to program software anymore, is in Wyoming, a team stumbles upon a dead body while playing Pokemon Go.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so he basically, and it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's a big deal because a guy's dead, but he stumbles upon a guy. The guy appears to have died. He calls 911, and they look at it and go, okay, it appears that he died from natural causes.
Mm.
So I thought this was interesting because people are playing Pokemon Go, which is a good thing. They're going out and hitting all these different areas that they haven't hit before. Uh,
They're getting
one
out and exploring, which is great, and my roommate is thrilled with it because they're coming across people that they never would have met otherwise. They're just ecstatic about it.
exactly, and there's excuse me, there's people who are they're they're hitting for years, for decades, really. What it boils down to, gamers such as myself have basically not gone out for anything. And
Right.
Pokemon Go is giving us a reason to leave our houses and to go basically walk around, the world, outside.
Yeah, that
And
outside magical place, the fantasy land of the sun.
right. And
The problem, the historical problem with gamers and gaming is the fact that it really ties people down to a physical location, especially if you have a desktop like my massive developer grade rig, I'll call it, since the chassis alone, despite having a handle on it, weighs as much as the spare tire in wheel, the steel wheel, which is about 33 pounds. That's the chassis. No wires, no components or anything. It's
right.
just not meant to be moved.
But well, the point I would make is that we've basically been encouraged to sit on our butts, sit inside, not go anywhere, basically not move. And
Yeah,
Pokemon Go has given us a reason to go out and explore.
yeah.
And
It will
what
break
this
that conditioning.
exactly, and what this particular story I'm talking about is the stereotypical. If you ever watched, a lot of crime shows, the runner has went out and he's running through through the park or whatever, and he comes across somebody who's died.
Yeah,
That's
seen a lot of
basically
those.
what this is. It's the same thing.
Yeah, if people walk out enough, they'll eventually come across something they would not have otherwise.
Right. But I also want to talk about a more, a slightly more modern one. Is you've got people going out, they're trying to catch Pokemon, which I tried to do this too. I needed to go uh, to our local Walmart and basically I just needed to buy some stuff. I need to buy some groceries. That's really what it boils down to. And my plan was to go there, buy the groceries, and then walk around and play Pokemon Go. Well, the Pokemon Go servers, and as far as I know, this is still the case, are down because of a DDoS attack.
Oh dear. And their
Yeah,
servers, from what I have heard, are barely capable of maintaining the massive influx of users as it is.
yeah, and so, but the thing is, the problem is, if you hit them with a DDoS attack, yeah, well, what are we gonna do? I mean, well, the game's over. You can't play. So all the walking around Walmart that I was planning on using to hatch my Pokemon eggs is over. I mean, it's just done.
It's a bummer.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's quite unfortunate. Well, it's first world problem, of course, but
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're in the Congo, you're not really worried about Pokemon Go. You're worried about surviving.
yeah, really. And survival is good for sure. Um, Yeah, and companies would like to survive just as well as people. Um, and one thing that could help is saving some money in their development costs. Just do a bit of a hard transition there.
Right.
Right now, there is really multiple standards for companies to do business worldwide on some things, and one of the obvious examples would be automobiles.
Hmm.
And
You wouldn't be
the
talking about
automakers,
unifying EU and US safety regulations to save billions, would you?
maybe it's only
Maybe.
a multi-billion-dollar big deal, the bigger, better deal. Anyways, the Center for Automotive Research, acronymed CAR, of course, tried to figure out how expensive it would be to leave standards the way they are now, as far as the differences between the U.S. and the European Union um, standardization practices go. They're very, very similar, but in many ways they're minutely different. For example, U.S. headlight laws require headlights to be a certain size. Okay, that was weird. My neighbor made a lot of noise. They're moving furniture, I believe. Anyways, the headlights in the U.S. must be quite bulky in comparison to some certain light designs that are now available, like these laser LED and other high intensity display or discharge lighting technologies that are used in some European cars.
Yeah. Now
Uh,
I see some pretty bright um,
oh yeah,
headlights. Are
you
these
see
are
those
these not
really
what?
bright. Yeah, that's another issue. Is those bright headlights you see on a lot of these cars? Some of that is due to the terrible, terrible lack of care by the automakers at pointing the lights. Some of the most egregious examples are certain German cars and the Toyota Corolla, which is awful. I practically have hours of video of it just from driving around daily. And like trucks, for example, most of them have reflector housings. They're large reflector housings, and some people will put in these brighter or higher intensity wavelength aftermarket bulbs that they sometimes buy off eBay. And that causes a lot of glare for very little benefit in actual lighting quality to the road. Now, the headlight design that, well, the mandate that the US government has is from the 60s, I believe. And back then, halogens were pretty, well, uncommon. And even halogens are pretty inferior to today's headlights. But the EU has a different standard and allows automakers to use other lighting technologies like the laser lights, where it will shoot a laser beam into this diffuser and it will diffuse into a specific pattern that it shines on the road quite clearly. And then there's these adaptive LED high beam systems where they will simply either tilt away or dim specific LEDs in the direction of oncoming drivers. So they won't be blinded yet still illuminate the road with high beams, which is great. But there are other, even very minor differences in cars, like specific height of the hood for pedestrian crash safety, airbags, uh, safety latches, and other systems, including bolt patterns, basically, uh, that are millimeters or even smaller apart, that make it necessary, although artificially necessary, for automakers to develop the same car twice in many occasions. Like Ford has done their one Ford plan where they've tried to make the Fusion and the Focus and the Fiesta three very common cars that Europe has got, but we also now have near identical copies of, but there are minor differences that they have to design twice and make the components twice and use two sets of tools and so on and so on. and it costs them billions of dollars. All the automakers, billions of dollars. Something. Um, I believe the link is in the show notes if you want to have a good deep dive into it on the nitty gritty details. But it costs several $billions, and each year there's millions of vehicles sold.
Yeah, the link I
But
have in the show notes is for the Unified Unified EU and U.S. safety regulations. Is that
right,
the one you're
that's an
referring to?
Autoblog. Yeah, an
Yeah.
Autoblog article. That's a good read by Joel Stocksdale. I enjoyed that read, but he has the details posted in his story, as well as a few links to other articles and a video showing the IIHS lighting review, which they are finally pushing that as opposed to their other endeavors, such as the small overlap. And I'm glad they're doing that because I've been building a case against cars like the
One group
Corolla
of U.S.
for quite some time now uh, because they're terrible. But yeah, what this means for the consumer, though, it may sound like, oh, it's just standards and it works the same, so what's the problem? Well, this money that the automakers could save could be to $1,200 roughly per car, um, or 600 to 1,200 depending on whether it's imported from Europe to the U.S. or the U.S. to Europe, and so on and so forth. That sounds quite nice. That's a lot of money on the hood. That's gas for half a year with a V6 luxury sedan, driving only 13,000 miles a year. Yeah. Um, and that would be good for people who want to use that money either for something else, or they want to upgrade their car with a different safety feature or a newer feature like say the navigation system in the car. That's usually around $800 as an add-on. That would make the difference right there. Or they can use that gas money, which some people will. I know I do. Drive almost every day, just not all day, air day. Is there anything you can comment on there? What would you use that money for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with you on some of the stuff. I'm looking at the links that you sent,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically, I mean, I totally get, some of the stuff being, quote unquote, being a separate uh, a thing that's actually, sent. Um,
I
yeah.
mean, it's basically they could do one of two or maybe three things. They could either get together the two general bodies of administrative powers to be um, would get together and decide, hey, we like your standard better. That works with us. Let's adopt it. Or they could try to just say, hey, for the time being, we could accept each other's safety regulations. We think they're good enough,
Yeah.
and just move on in the meantime until they fully standardize
And
both
that's
sides.
exactly it. You could
Yeah,
you could take, generally speaking, and standardize on a lot of things, but it looks like there's still going to be some there's going to be some overlap, I guess, on the safety regulations.
right.
Just looking at them.
Yeah, there's basically a lot of overlap already um, that can come down to something really trivial that doesn't have any actual impact on how the car functions or how safe it is. It's just, hey, it's some minor detail we have to follow, legally speaking, or we
Right.
can't produce the car.
Right, and I don't know how intelligently I can speak on it, but it does look like there's there's some overlap that needs to be addressed.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of overlaps. That headlight thing
Right.
I mentioned is one of the more egregious ones, and that's where the U.S. is behind in terms of the standard. But the EU is backwards on a few things as well, and
Right, and I
it's sort of like a side grade, as someone mentioned on another subject altogether. I mean, one's not one set of standards may not necessarily be better than the other, uh, but they are good and bad in their own ways.
right, and the I don't know if you're familiar with the Volvo I have. It's a Volvo um, 2000 model car that I have,
Yeah, the
and
V70 with so many miles, it's quite a tank you have there.
right, well, and I yeah blew the radiator out, but that's a whole other story. It it hits basically the way it works is that if you put it in quote unquote Canadian mode, it
Hmm.
always runs the the headlights.
Oh,
So
okay.
and that's basically all it does is it runs the headlights all day every day.
They're daytime running lights or always on
Exactly.
lights,
Exactly.
which
So
makes sense. It's often a bit darker and cloudier up there. You have shorter days in general.
right, but your options are either run the daytime lights all the time or never at all.
Interesting.
Right. So that hits a whole other issue that I think is beyond what I can talk about. Uh, you probably know a whole lot more than I do about that issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something I feel passionate about.
All right. Well, let's jump to a story I wanted to talk about. It's basically a mini NES Classic Edition. Now, a lot of people are probably too young to remember the classic Nintendo. Um, but basically, Nintendo of America, or well, Nintendo is releasing a version that's quote unquote compatible with the Wii U that comes with 30 games.
Yeah.
So,
Uh, I quite like this idea actually. I know it's pretty novel um and sorry, someone's trying to call me.
right.
It's pretty novel, yet I really like it. And yes, you can get free emulators of the games, but this is kind of a neat thing. You can just buy a little box and plug it up to your TV. You can carry it with you because it's pretty small. It's pretty
Right.
compact. Instead of toting around that computer again, although it's still semi-stationary, or is it?
Well,
Um, you now have a vehicle that's given a power inverter, or a lot of newer cars like a Ford Fusion Hybrid, for example, that has a wall outlet. And RCA jacks, you could play this in your car. I
right.
advise being parked, of course. Um, and yeah, it's kind of fun. It comes with a little controller, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's games on it, like 30 different games, including Final Fantasy, Metroid, and Zelda and Mario
Right. So,
classics.
and when I put this on the list to be discussed, I originally was gonna that originally the point was going to be, yes, this is great. We're going to talk about how wonderful this is. But after reading a lot about it, it's 30 games. It does not accept old school cartridges, which is what I thought originally. So you
Which
can't
is a bit
do
of a bummer.
Yeah, which is amazing that it won't take NES cartridges, because if you've ever looked at the wiring diagram for an old school NES, there's nothing to it.
Yeah,
There's
I know there's
really
nothing.
nothing to it. Like, I could build it, on my desk that's standing behind me with no trouble.
Right. I mean, they're
But
absurdly simple devices if you look at them now compared to, say, my phone or even my Game Boy Advanced SP right here, which is kind of old now.
exactly.
Let's
So
see, it was made in
I
China 10 years ago, I think. Oh, no, 14.
right. So I love the fact that the controller, which is an old school 1980s version, 1980s version of the NES controller, will work with the Wii U. I
Right.
love that fact. That is amazing.
And I believe Wii U controllers are compatible with this device as well if you wanted to use those
Well, yeah,
for
because
the
it's
buttons.
it's basically a Wii U that plays 30 games. And that's the thing that bothers me, is that it plays 30 games. It will never play more than that,
Mm.
and that's as far as you can go. You know, it's
It,
basically a
it's
Wii
like a
U.
simplified, dumbed down.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
basically
Wii
a
U. It's
dumbed
cheaper.
down Wii U that will play 30 old school games. That's preloaded with 30 games.
The classic.
Exactly.
It's more of an aesthetic novelty device than anything else, really. But it is kind of fun to think
Yeah.
about.
So
I would love it. I have an original NES at my house actually. I even have the laser gun, which apparently does not work very well now because they need CRT TVs to effectively work because the low refresh rates of LCDs. But that's another subject.
right. Well, the old school LCDs, I believe they refreshed it once. You know, one frame was once per 60 seconds, and
Yes, 60
they,
hertz.
yeah. So the those don't work very well.
Yeah, I'm going to look this up. But I think the refresh rate of old CRT screens were in the hundreds, like 500, 600, maybe.
Yeah, it all depended on what you were trying to do.
Right. And what the little laser gun uh, used for the classic Nintendo was basically you click the trigger and it will flash one frame on the screen in a specific way, and it would read it back to the laser gun. It has an optical sensor that would pick that up, and that's when it would tell how and where it was pointing. But yeah,
Right, but that was 1/60th of a second.
right.
Yeah. So
Apparently fast enough.
the current model TVs are faster than that.
Yes.
So it literally, if you manage to freeze it, which you can find this online, if you manage to freeze it at the moment that it read it, it was a rectangle on a black screen.
Right.
So yeah, so this I have mixed feelings about. I love the fact that it comes with 30 games, and I may have stored. Let me see. No, I didn't actually save it. But basically, the 30 games were 30 very popular games. It was Mario 1, Mario 2, Mario 3.
A lot of the Super Mario games for the NES Classic, plus Legend of Zelda 1 and 2, and the original Metroid.
Exactly.
Oh, and the original Final Fantasy. Not one of these remakes, but the very first one.
Exactly.
Amongst many more. There are 30 games, which is quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's an absurdly simple device. So I think it would possibly sell even more if it came down in price a bit, but it's just now coming out, or is just now announced at $60, I believe.
Yeah, it's $59.99 for the core unit, and then it's another $10, $9.99 for the controller.
Yeah, which I believe it comes with one controller already, so that brings you up to $70 plus tax and shipping if you need it
Mm-hmm.
to play multiplayer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's certainly a novelty item, and like you said earlier, they're absurdly simple.
Mm-hmm.
You could build an adapter for them. I know they're absurdly simple because the one I have, I took apart and gave a nice cleaning since it had trouble playing from years of buildup. Just
Right.
yeah, atmosphere.
Okay.
All right.
Yep. So if
I may
y'all
just continue to play Ruby over here.
say that again.
Eventually, I may continue to play Pokemon Ruby now that we started talking about it after the
Well,
podcast.
I started something playing.
Oh.
What did I start playing?
I don't know. Tell us about it.
Just close the window, please. It sounds like one of my old videos.
I see.
But anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, I must have clicked on one of my old videos. Oh well. So, I've told everything to close, and apparently my computer is not going to cooperate. So, that puts another one in the cam, puts a pin in another one, however you want to describe it. I've been Joe of the West.
And I was Jill's.
Who are you? Who are you?
That's Jill looking Zeal.
Zeal like a Zeal. Seriously, I've closed every window, but it's still playing.
Well, folks, I am Zeal of Sparta, and I will have some more clips up soon. Hopefully, I recorded a few this morning, actually, playing Halo. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so go
I
check
get
out Zeal of Sparta. His, I believe, YouTube page is youtube.com/Zeal of Sparta. Is that still correct?
yes, basically Zeal of Sparta YouTube, Zeal of Sparta at Twitter, and Zeal of Sparta using underscores instead of spaces on Twitch. I hope to be streaming sometime in the near future, and yeah, I look forward to that when I'm not driving.
Okay. Well, like I said, literally, hey, look, I finally got it closed.
Yay.
So if you do want to see more of what I'm doing, hopefully without as much weird technical, issues, Joe of the West at Twitter, at Joe of the West at YouTube.com. Just hit me up and let me know what you think, and we will see all of y'all later.
Bye bye.